Hello everyone, welcome back to alkaline hydroxide 784. Today, as seen by the topic, we are definitely doing a topic that is very substantial because we are directly impacted by it. Yes, it's the thing that we care about more than religion or more than our study, more than literally anything else. Actually, our studies are, so education. Well, this can be evidenced by the fact that there's an increasing number of bell curve worshippers. Yes, indeed. So, given that there's a lot of stuff that we can cover, and given that I'm also well acquainted with the system, the episode will actually come over 2 weeks. As you can see, I originally recorded an audio a few days ago, hoping to release this on Thursday, but as you can see, today is Sunday, so yeah, I already failed at my plan. so, yeah, the idea was that this week covers part 1 and part 2, and next week covers part 3 and part 4. But it's already next week, so I'll figure it out. Yeah, sorry. But anyways, today we'll be covering these questions. So just look at that, and the timings will also be there. Okay, so let's start, shall we? So the first topic is on sleep and, well, school, I guess. So it's about the lack of sleep that people get. And it is indeed our least favorite thing of school. I mean, waking up in the early morning. But actually, what's worse than waking up in the early morning is being late to school, according to me. So, yeah. But from primary school kids to junior college, students populate the MRT trains and stations every morning before 7 a.m., rushing off for school. Whereas for university students, well, they usually skip their 8 a.m. lectures, so it's not such a big deal, I guess. Okay, I'm just kidding. I know some people have to go to their lessons, but you get the point. But for me personally, I'm actually both a morning person and a night person. I actually function best from 8 to 12, both AM and PM. And I tend to have trouble sleeping in the night. Well, that's just me. But at the same time, I can wake up at 7 if I want to. In fact, in secondary school and JC, I was probably waking up at 5:30 or 5:45 a.m. because I take so long just to get ready. But this just isn't about me, like I'm a sample size of one, so it doesn't make sense to use my data. It doesn't work. So let's look at the general trends then. Well, if according to what I've observed, a lot of people feel sleepy during the day and like literally any time during the day, and somehow they seem to be studying at 12 a.m. or even later. So why is that going on, and how can we change that? So how do we change that? Well, first of all, we need to know why teenagers like to sleep and like to stay awake at night, right? Well, for primary school kids, it's actually different because they prefer to sleep earlier. They're kids and they need as much sleep as they can get in a sense. But around the time that you get puberty, like around 11 to 13 years old, your circadian rhythm starts shifting along with your puberty. And this causes teens to sleep and wake up 2 hours later than literally the younger counterparts and also the adults, I guess. And that could explain why I was able to do maths questions at 11 p.m. when I was in P5/P6. But there's one thing, okay, but it doesn't explain why there are people in JC who sleep at 3 a.m. Like how is that a thing? Oh well, there's an explanation I can provide as to why they might be doing this. First off, in JC or even in secondary school, we generally have a lot of academic work. So as you can see, the timings where school ends and CCA ends. And in JC, CCA actually ends later than in secondary school because of the way that the lessons are arranged. And after that, the students had to go home, have dinner, homework, like dinner, and then only they can do their homework and or whatever studying that they can do before they sleep. But the problem is, after a certain period of time, of course, they may be quite awake until 11 p.m. But if they if they need quite a bit of time just to eat dinner and then get ready to do their homework, by the time that they start doing their homework, they're already starting to feel a bit sleepy. But they're not too sleepy, but just a little bit sleepy. And over time, their focus will generally decrease. It become less and less productive, and because of that, they stay up even longer because they need to finish their work, right? And they become even less productive. So it takes a really long time for them to finish their work, and they sleep very late. Of course, maybe not 3 a.m. Not everyone does that, but maybe like 1 a.m. At the very least, I suppose. And apart from that, there is also pressure to study due to national exams and yeah, especially national exams. That's why JC students are the ones who are mostly doing the 3 a.m. thing, and not I hope it's not the secondary school students as well. But you can see there's that pressure, and especially for those who feel like they lack somewhere, they end up mugging in the night every day in the hopes that they'll become better. But yeah, that's what they end up doing. Of course, this definitely has consequences. With a lack of sleep, your health will obviously take a toll. And I don't need to explain that, you can just watch another video for that. But the thing that we can look at education wise, the main consequence in that sense is that students are less focused the next day. So they are less productive, right? So because they are less productive, um, they then get more work and then they have to catch up again and they become even more pressured, and then again they have lesser time, no time to sleep, and then you can see this cycle right here. If I literally draw this circle, it'll just go like this and like this and like this and like this, and then it becomes very stressful for all the students, and they end up in this very terrible positive feedback cycle that is actually very negative. And this then gives more work for the students and the teachers, so it's not very nice. Like, it's just unnecessary time spent on learning and relearning the material, especially before the national exams. So what can we do? As you can see, there's this question that people usually ask: can we start an hour later? Well, is that possible? It would be beneficial to the students, of course, because waking up later is actually useful. We're more awake an hour later compared to the time that we actually go there. But the reason why this doesn't happen is, one, this would actually delay their parents. So let's say some students actually get dropped off at school by their parents and stuff like that. And for them, those parents wouldn't want to be dropping off their kids an hour later. So either they'll drop them off at the same time, which means the kids still have to wake up at the same time, or it might kind of affect the parents' working time too. So they wouldn't really be happy with that. And the second reason would be that it would delay CCAs, or it could reduce the time that the CCA is that the CCA has, in the sense, and that time is very precious and very, very limited. And that would be kind of bad news for people who really like their CCA. And three, it won't actually prevent people from sleeping at 3 a.m. It only affects the waking up time, not the sleeping time. So it doesn't actually help with the problem that I identified. But I still feel like it is important to start an hour later. Like, if we could, we should try to do that. But a different change has to come with that, which is to figure out the sleeping time part of it. And you need to get people to sleep at 10:30 or 11 and somehow still be efficient and finish their homework on time. And of course, it is actually not impossible to do that. It is very possible. And I managed to do that in secondary school and JC for most of the days. I'm not kidding. But then again, especially for JC, I didn't have any time consuming CCA. I just had like 2 days of 2 or 3 hours, and that's about it. I didn't really have to do much. Yeah, that's why I could, in theory, still afford to sleep by 10:30 and 11. And I also had my own ways to do it, in a sense. But I know that there's some people who will be really busy with their sports CCAs and stuff like that. And and for them, I cannot really help them much, I guess. But there's also people who are like me, who actually don't have much of a CCA commitment, but they differ in that they actually sleep at very late times. And for those people, I think what we can do is we can teach everyone some time management skills. Of course, I'm not saying that JC students are not good at time management, and by right, technically being good at it will help you do better in A-levels. So there is that element. It's not just about studying or being smart or anything. But at the same time, I feel like there needs to be this, it'd be good if they teach that in one of their little CLE lessons or whatever they call them. And that might actually help both people who are really busy and those who are not so busy but they don't really know how to plan their sleep time or their waking up time or whatever it is. Yeah, but apart from that, what could be done is to give lesser homework if possible. If because of course in JC it's a bit different because the homework usually doesn't need to be handed in, so it's up to the student to decide how much work to do as well. In that sense, it's okay. But in secondary school, maybe there's a lot of subjects and there's homework for each of the subjects. So maybe if it's possible to remove any unnecessary homework, it will be great, or any time-consuming homework for that matter. Yeah, but that's just my opinion. You can decide that for yourself. So the next topic that we'll look at is what we don't learn in school, basically life skills in the sense. So what I mean is that we generally learn curricular material and maybe learn a bit of like values, in apostrophe marks values and other things like sex education and financial literacy and all that stuff, right? Well, that sounds great, but the problem is most of the time we learn most of it in primary school and maybe lower secondary school where we aren't so focused because we actually have the time at that point of time, but we don't have the focus, as you can see in the first statement here. And in upper secondary and JC, we have lesser time to learn these things, but we have more understanding and focus. So if things are taught during that time, we are more likely to retain the information. But since most of it is actually taught in primary school, I remember having a lot of this kind of stuff being taught in primary school, right? Well, since that's the case, I probably don't think anyone really remembers what they learned, and they probably won't be focusing half the time. They'll just be like, oh, I want to go home. That kind of mentality while having these lessons. And therefore, it's actually kind of ineffective to some extent. There's a little bit of retention, but it's still kind of ineffective. And at the same time, a lot of this is quite touch and go. So like they just do it in one lesson and then they finish. That's it. And I don't know if people really remember that thing that they learned in that one lesson. It's not very effective. I feel. So because of this whole problem, by the time we actually become adults, we don't really feel like adults, even at 20 or 21. Even though that's pretty young, we still have a bit of time to feel like adults, hopefully, but the point is we don't feel like it. And we actually need to figure things out for ourselves once we become adults. And that's actually the meaning of an adult, I just realized. Okay, but we need to actually end up educating ourselves on these different topics, or we need to hopefully get the opportunity to learn this in our school in like a greater depth kind of learning. And that is problematic in a different way. What does that mean? Well, if some schools actually, like, this is a different example. So apart from stuff like sex education and financial literacy, another thing that not all schools teach equally is apparently IT skills. I saw in one of the Reddit comments. And because of this, there's a disparity. Like if you have PW, right, this is actually a more immediate skill. So in PW, you have some people who don't even know what Google Drive is, and other people who are like experts in Google Drive and all the functions that you can do there. And that kind of leads to a bit of a problem. But apart from PW, if you look at an actual overall greater sense of how these skills can be helpful or not helpful, we have this disparity when it comes to opportunities that people can take up later in life. It can be either during school itself, or it can be like jobs or other such opportunities. And people who end up learning these things by chance in school end up getting the upper end in these opportunities as compared to those who didn't even encounter these in school. And it's not like they can know that, oh, there's such a thing and then search it for themselves. Like, they need to know that it exists before they search for it. And I feel like because of that, they end up not learning the skill, even though there was that possibility that the school could teach them to do it. And due to this, meritocracy ends up favoring the lucky few who actually get to learn all of the skills in school itself. And that is not cool, right? It's kind of not very meritocratic anymore. Yeah, so yeah, because of this, right? Because of this might end up leading to certain disparities. So how do we avoid it? Well, the first thing that we can do is to conduct more classes during school time, right? Isn't that what you would expect to do? Like if we conduct those classes for everyone, then everyone will get it. But we can't really do that because we already figured out that there's not enough time. Like in JC especially, you don't have time to do all this. We like the students will want to be studying for their A levels more than anything else. So instead of actually spending a lot of time teaching the actual skill, what I suggest is we let the teachers share the resources for the students to access if they want to learn the thing. Like for example, if you want to learn Google Drive, maybe you can say, oh, there's something called Google Drive. This is what it does. You can go to YouTube and learn about it. You can tell that information instead. Because if at least they know that it exists, then they can like the students can go and learn about it themselves. They're completely capable of doing that, and that would actually be more meritocratic because it then relies on whether the students themselves decide to do it or not. And yeah, little comment below, you can just read that yourself. But the thing is, yeah, this might be a better option and it can save quite a lot of time. You don't have to like really spend an entire 30-minute lesson teaching students how to use it, use something that they probably would forget in the next day. You can instead give them the resources, like the link to the resources, or like the area where you can go and access the source of the resources so that they can go and do it themselves and they can take their own time to learn it as well. So yeah, that's what I would like to say. So I will be doing a series on some of the internet related things because I realize that it might be a bit hard for schools to cover such things, and I can do it, so why not? So I'll be doing that later on. And for now, you can just go to Reddit and ask other people for help if you need to. There's definitely a great community there. Okay, so the next thing that we can look at apart from life skills is societal issues. So what I mean is, of course, we do get to get a taste of this during our social studies or GP lessons, but some topics do get quite left out in the sense that, especially race and religion. Like we just touch and go on like RHG, or like in some GP lessons where they talk about the racial discrimination in other places and stuff like that. We don't really get to sit down and then talk with each other, like have a face-to-face discussion with each other on certain issues that we usually face. And when they do happen on Racial Harmony Day, no one has the energy to do it. So yeah, it's a bit problematic. And apart from that, other forms of societal biases, for example, against LGBTQ or against single moms or other groups of people who are generally, just basically just left out of things. They're not really being discussed outside of GP lesson, and even in some places, not even during the GP lesson. So yeah, it's a problem. So I mean, there's always this thing being said about Singaporeans being merely tolerant, but not fully accepting of those that they perceive as different. Usually this is said about race, but I think we can apply this to a larger extent, like in a general sense. And it makes sense to say that. And the best way to change that is to have more discussions in a safe space. Like we that's the easiest way to understand a problem, is to literally talk to people who face the problem and to understand their situation and to try to step into their shoes. And apparently, well, even if you worry about awkwardness or people not participating, you don't have to worry about it. The Gen Zs are definitely up for it, as we can see here. They'll definitely be receptive to it, and they just need the opportunity and the time to do it. Of course, we don't have time, so oops. But if we do, it might be worthwhile actually taking some time just to do this kind of stuff. It might be more worthwhile than teaching sex ed, because honestly that isn't as effective as I feel it should be. And this might be more worthwhile than that. Yeah, so we do need to have at least like more discussions on social issues, because it will help people understand each other better and also approach people in a more respectful and sensible way. And at the same time, it will help the the youths to figure out the issues that actually exist in Singapore, so that in the future when they vote for vote during the GE and all that, they know what they're looking out for. They know what they want to be addressed in the sense. Yeah, that's basically it. And the final topic is on the role of CCAs in schools. So this will be about CCAs or external activities kind of lah. So I know some of you hate your CCAs and some of you love it more than literally anything else because it's like, wow, it's wonderful. But we can all agree that CCAs are compulsory for the most part. They're quite compulsory. Of course, there are some exceptions, but you get the idea. They're quite compulsory in the sense. And one of the main exceptions is if you're doing a national exam. So usually P6 kids don't actually have to take CCAs, or in JC you don't actually need to take a CCA, although it is encouraged to take one. And what does that point out? Well, it is reasonable because we need time to study, especially in JC when you don't even have time to do much. Like you have like only 2 years to cram like 3 years worth of stuff in for your exams. If you didn't know, in UK they actually do this for 3 years, not 2 years. It's like Millennia Institute style kind of learning there. But yeah, that's the reason why CCA is not compulsory in JC. But it does highlight how important and all-encompassing we view the exam. It's like so important that we are willing to, remove the CCA compulsoriness to allow students to study for the exams. So yeah, that's besides the point. Let's talk about why CCA is important to begin with. So the reason why they're important, well, first of all, you can learn skills that you otherwise don't learn in your acads, including social skills. Then the second reason would be that you can, it's like a hobby basically. So this will be also applicable to other external activities, like maybe classes that you take outside of school. So you have a hobby that is, relieving your stress, because Singapore education system is very stressful, right? This is the place where you can release all that stress and feel a bit like free for some time. And the third reason is because people actually get their friends from CCAs rather than from their classes. So I think, yeah, this is pretty obvious. And you tend to get like a solid bunch of friends and you get to have fun interacting with other people in your CCA. And four, it's actually kind of like a mini version of your adult life. You get to experience something called work-life balance, as I say sarcastically, but something like work-life balance. You have your study and then you have your so-called fun CCA stuff, yeah. And another reason would be that you could, in theory, find out your new talent, your new passion. So if you're forced to take a CCA, maybe the CCA you take is actually something that you're really good at, and then you only realize it because you took the CCA. So in a way, you kind of establish your identity while taking CCAs. And if the CCA that you take is really terrible and you hate it, at least you know now that you hate doing that one thing, and you can avoid it in the future, in a sense. So that's another reason. And of course, there's many other reasons. You can come up with the reasons yourselves. This is by no means exhaustive. And of course, in other countries, well, CCA isn't a compulsory thing. And in America, for example, you usually see the things just they put it on the board or something, and then people decide whether they want to go for the club or not. And some people will either go for a school club or they will go for external classes like their dance or whatever classes that they take. But here, given that we are all kiasu, a lot of people do both. They do both the CCAs in school as well as external lessons of other sorts. And I'm not even talking about tuition, I'm talking about stuff like piano lessons, dance lessons, whatever other artsy related stuff, or even sports maybe. Yeah, sports lessons. So yeah, of course, no surprises because it is Singapore. But given the situation, is CCA really meant to be compulsory? Well, I can give you some reasons why CCA is actually compulsory, but this is my reasons. I did not research this and then find out, this is the reason why they're keeping it compulsory. I think MOE probably tells like, CCA is to help have like a well-rounded education or something, so that's what they actually say. But this is what I feel are the reasons. The first reason is to upkeep, is to make sure that CCAs themselves have enough students, because if they don't have enough students, they can't really run, like they can't exist. And by having enough students in CCAs, we can have a decent selection of CCAs where everyone gets something that they somewhat like. Of course, maybe not very, very like, but somewhat like, you know what I mean? Yeah, so they're somewhat interested in the CCA rather than something that they totally hate in the sense. And this can actually be seen in the fact that, when overall enrollment decreases, certain niche CCAs actually get phased out and they get kicked, like they're just removed. For example, in my secondary school, RGS, there was Indian Orchestra. That was my CCA. But after I left, the next batch of students had very low, like much lower enrollment numbers in the sense. I think for us it was above 400, and for the newest batches it was way less, like it was lesser than 400. And because of that, INO was basically phased out. Oh well. And there were only two to begin with. There was one in RGS and one in, like, there's another one. And wait, I kind of forgot what was the other school's name. I'm so sorry. I apologize. But okay. But now there's only one Indian Orchestra in secondary school, so wow. That's crazy. Okay, anyways. And because of that, you can definitely see that in order for the other CCAs to survive, even the more normal E ones, you need to force some people to join the CCAs, right? The CCA will have enough people in it in order to survive. And that's why CCA is compulsory. That's the first reason. The second reason is it helps keep all of the little kids longer in school, especially the younger ones, I suppose, because usually parents might be concerned about what their kids are doing after their lessons. And some of them might trust their kids to go home and study and do normal things without getting into trouble, but some of them may not trust they won't trust their little kids to do anything worthwhile and meaningful. So CCA is like the meaningful thing that they can do while they are waiting for their parents to come back home, in a sense. Yeah, so it's a bit more secure and a bit more safe in a sense, and the students are actually doing something meaningful rather than just wasting their time or just being confused as to what to do. So third reason would be for those who are not, like, they're not financially well off, and they can't really afford all those external fancy piano class or whatever class that is there. They may not really know what else to do. They like, if CCA wasn't compulsory, maybe they might go and do some other activity instead. But because CCAs are compulsory, they might be forced. They're more like forced to actually find out something that they like, and they get to try out something new. Of course, it depends on whether they actually like it or not, but to some extent, usually they will like it, so it's okay. And especially for some of the things like IT or sports, the equipment is provided by the school, so these less well-off kids can actually get to experience the same activity without having to pay money for it. And that gives them the opportunity to learn more about themselves and find out an interest that they otherwise wouldn't be able to find out. So yeah, that's the third reason. And for the fourth reason is it kind of forces people to, not just do ACADS all day long, because that is very boring, and have a bit more variety in their everyday activities. Although you could say that CCA might give more stress for people who otherwise needed time to study, but if you think about it, learning how to deal with both studies and another activity is quite important. Even if they start early, it kind of helps them later in life. So yeah, CCA is meant to be compulsory. So what can we do instead if we want to allow people to have a bit of more decision making, like more choice in the sense? Well, it could be possible to allow some people who, if they have a very well established, very time consuming activity outside, or if they really need to catch up with their studies, they can get the option to not have CCA. That's what I would feel is the best option. And of course, for the catching up to studies thing is probably, like, that thing already exists. For those who are really bad at studies, they do get the option to not have CCA. But for the other option, like the first one, I'm not really sure if it's there. Yeah. And of course, we should make sure it's case by case because we don't want people deserting their CCAs because that would be bad, right? We need to keep up the CCA membership. And of course, there's already the option of creating your own CCA if you have enough like minded people, but of course, that is hard, and that is why people actually go and do external activities because some of them don't even exist in CCAs to begin with. They're too niche for them. It's too niche for the schools to actually establish a CCA. So, yeah, that's the end of the three topics for this part. Yay! Yeah, I don't really have a conclusion because these are three different topics and I can't really connect them together. So what I can say is instead we might have a big overall conclusion at the end of the four parts instead lah. So just look forward to part two. I don't know when it will come. I'm so sorry. I have to plan the schedule again. Yeah, I hope you find this video useful though. If you do, please press the like button and subscribe. Do look forward to the rest of the three parts. I'm not sure when they'll come, but they'll hopefully come this week or next week at most. And as always, stay safe and study well. Bye.